If I were to ask you to name me some of the most dominant teams in NBA history, what would you say? If I told you right now, name me the most dominant teams ever, what would you come up with? Let me guess. You'd probably say the Warriors. You'd probably say the Spurs. You'd probably say the Lakers of the 80s and the 2000s. And then you'd most definitely say the Chicago Bulls and the Boston Celtics. But I think there's a key similarity or key trend between a majority of those teams. And that is that most of the most dominant teams in NBA history have come from the Western Conference. And that is, well, not the sole reason, but that is one of the major reasons why most people tout, and still to this day tout, that the Western Conference is the more dominant and the better conference over the East. But, as the KD Warriors came to an end and the parity started to shift around the league, has that balance in power finally shifted back towards the East? Because for some people, the Eastern Conference is better than the West. Still to this day, they might say that the East is better. But is that true? Because is the Eastern Conference really and truly better than the West? So why the hell is this a conversation? Why are we talking about the Eastern Conference being better than the West, or the West being better than the East, vice versa? Why are we talking about this topic? Because it's the dead of the off season. There's nothing going on. And who doesn't love a NBA debate? Who doesn't love some stupid Twitter topic that has everybody raging their thumbs on the keyboard? There's really not much better. So why don't we resort to another stupid debate? And one of the most stupid, at least I think, is the West better than the East, or vice versa? Which conference is better than the other? Because in recent history, well, I don't really have to tell you the history. You know that in recent history, in the past 20, 25 years, everybody knows that the Western Conference has been better than the Eastern Conference. And that is a fact. That is by far a fact. It's had more championships, more winners, better teams, the dynasties. You haven't really seen a dynasty come out of the Eastern Conference. I guess you could say the Miami Heatles, but even them, that was only 2 championships. Whereas the West, you have the Spurs, who were in 18 straight playoffs, won 5 championships, and then you have the Warriors, who won 4 championships, were in 9 finals in 10 years or whatever it was. Those are 2 massive dynasties, and one of the biggest dynasties in NBA history. We've had not even a little peep of that from the Eastern Conference. Obviously, there was a run with LeBron James and the Cavs, well, young LeBron, even old LeBron as well, with the Cavs, and the Miami Heatles as well. But the Eastern Conference was just not quite up there with the West. It wasn't as deep as the West. It didn't have as big as the teams of the West. They didn't have the bigger contenders or championships, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So why is this a topic now? Why is there even a conversation? Because before then, there's never really even been a conversation. The West was always better. So why is there even a conversation now that the East may be better? Well, I think it's because of the resurgence of the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks' place on top of the NBA. Because for the past couple of years, coming into each season, most people have put either the Milwaukee Bucks or the Boston Celtics as the title favorites and as the number 1 contenders to win the championship. Either one or two. Because the Milwaukee Bucks won in 2021, and then ever since then, they have either been the title favorite or been right there and close to it to being the title favorite or title contender. And that's probably going to continue for the next season or next 2 seasons. And then now the Boston Celtics and their resurgence into one of the bigger and better teams, and arguably the best team in the NBA when they're on their day. That's another reason why. Because the Boston Celtics, ever since they got to that finals run against the Warriors, have been the title favorites or close to it. It's been the Milwaukee Bucks at number 1, or it's been the Boston Celtics at number 1, and the other one being at number 2. And I think that's the reason why people have again looked towards the Eastern Conference as being better than the West. Because the Warriors dropped off, they lost KD, and then they went into a complete free fall. And then teams like the Lakers, they won a championship, but they went into a free fall. The Clippers never really got up there. And then it seemed as though the West was dwindling, and then the East had these juggernauts rising up above the rest. But it's still not enough to have them as a better conference. Because unfortunately, no matter how good the Boston Celtics have been in recent years, no matter how good the Milwaukee Bucks have been, that Milwaukee Bucks team, although they won the championship, has been aging. And to be honest, they don't look like that team anymore. And maybe they can prove me wrong. But honestly, are the Milwaukee Bucks really up for it again? Can they go and do this whole thing again? I don't think they can, because every single year since that championship that they won, they've just looked worse and worse, and that team construction has just looked like it isn't as good as we thought it would be. Because when they won that championship, and the reason why people even looked towards the Eastern Conference as being better was because people looked at that Milwaukee Bucks championship, people looked at that roster, and they said they'll be together for 4 or 5 years, so they could go on to win 2, 3, 4 championships. But that's not how it is anymore, because we've seen the flaws in this Milwaukee Bucks team, and I don't think those flaws have gone anywhere. And even worse, they've just aged even more. Giannis is 28 and coming into his 30s. Drew is obviously well into his 30s. Middleton and Brook Lopez are all in their 30s. And last playoffs, they didn't look like that complete cohesive unit that went on to win the championship. Instead, they capitulated against the 8th-seeded Miami Heat. And so did the Boston Celtics. This young, fresh NBA team that on their day, still on their day, they are the best team in the NBA by far. But it's that Boston Celtics mentality that lets them down. When the going gets tough and the pressure is really on and the bright lights are really on the Boston Celtics, their 2 young stars in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have not showed up. And they haven't been good enough. And that's exactly why the Boston Celtics have found themselves not in a finals appearance and found themselves bounced out by the Miami Heat as well. 2 of those teams, 2 of those juggernauts, 2 of the teams that are meant to be title favorites or one of the bigger contenders got bounced out by an 8th-seeded Miami Heat and almost single-handedly by Jimmy Butler. And, the Celtics put up a fight and they showed you why the hell they're even a contender, but then it was too little too late. And that's exactly why they found themselves back home, way earlier than people expected. And just like that, the Miami Heat went through. And people would say, well, that's another argument for the East, because the Miami Heat and the likes of the 76ers show that they're sort of a deep conference, but that's really a facade. The Eastern Conference really just is the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. And no matter how well the Miami Heat play, no matter how above their level they play, they don't really have enough to win a championship. Maybe if they get Damian Lillard, they have a chance. But truly and honestly, no matter how Cinderella of a run the Miami Heat have, they're not good enough to win a championship. And that's why the Eastern Conference is just left with 2 teams. And even those 2 teams have shown their failures. And they've shown that they might not be good enough anymore to win a championship. But let me not get too ahead of myself, because that could all change. The Boston Celtics, all they need is 1 good year. But then again, that's exactly what we said during the start of their Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown era. They went against LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals, and everybody said they're just going to learn from this experience, they'll build on it, and they'll find themselves in the same position, and they'll fight their way through. They got to the finals against the Warriors, and they by far were a more talented team, and they should have won that championship based on talent. But of course, we know the sport isn't about just talent, and their mentality let them down, and they lost the championship. But people said they'd learn, they'd build on this, but yet, in almost in even worse situation really, because at least the Warriors were a more talented team than the Miami Heat, found themselves in a similar situation in the Eastern Conference Final, a team that they should be comfortably beating, and then they lost. And almost in embarrassing fashion if the Miami Heat could close the series out, but they still lost. And they should have been beating the Miami Heat. It doesn't matter that it went to a Game 7. It shouldn't have gone anywhere near a Game 7. And if anything, the Miami Heat should have swept the Celtics. But yet, they somehow found a way to lose. Will they finally learn from that experience? Because it didn't seem like they learned against the Cavs. It didn't seem like they learned against the Heat in the bubble. And it didn't seem like they learned against the Warriors. And for those reasons, and for the failures of the Bucks and the Celtics, I think the power is still held by the Western Conference. And the Nuggets really pushed that over the edge for me because they look like the best team in NBA in that postseason. And I don't think they'll stay like that. I think obviously the Celtics are the best team in NBA on their day, as I've said over and over again. But the Nuggets showed up. And more importantly, the real argument for the Western Conference is that they are a way, way, way deeper conference than the East. As I said, the East only has really two teams, two real contenders. The West, on the other hand, you can have about 7, 8, 9, even 10 teams that have an actual shot of getting to the conference finals at least, maybe. Obviously not to win a championship, but to actually win a championship. From the Western Conference, there's about 6, 7 teams that you could really, really make an argument for and put up a strong case. Obviously the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, like I said, the Lakers, the Warriors, the Kings. The Kings are a new team and they look like they could be onto something. The Grizzlies as well, another young team. The Clippers, of course. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, if they finally click and they're able to play a full postseason, they could win a championship. And it could even go down as far as the Pelicans. The Pelicans, OKC Thunder, that might be a little bit of a stretch. But, the Pelicans are truly, they were the 1 seed for a reason. When they had Zion Williamson and they had all their players there playing, they looked like a good team. Were they a contender-esque team? I don't know. But they're still a good team. And they could really push for something like a conference finals appearance or even a finals appearance if they have Zion Williamson, if he's healthy, if he's playing and that team are just healthy. So just there, that's 7, 8 teams in the Western Conference that have a shot and really have a case for themselves to be in the likes of a conference finals or an NBA finals and to really have a shot at an NBA championship. But as I said, the East, it's only really 2 teams, the Bucks and the Celtics. So I think that's why the power is still held in the West. No matter how good the Milwaukee Bucks and Boston Celtics have played in recent years to really try and tug that rope back towards the East, in the same way they failed and tripped over their own legs to allow the slack to go back towards the West. And I think the West is very firmly holding that rope over towards their side. Because how deep the Western Conference is and how big that talent pool is in the West, maybe you could say the Eastern Conference has more top-end talent. Like really at the tippity top with Giannis and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But the West is just way too deep to even argue. I think that's why they are still the better conference than the East. Because the East, they tried. They damn well tried. 20, 25 years of being the inferior conference. They really tried. And they probably had that title for a year when the Bucks were champions. But I think with the emergence of the likes of the Kings and the Grizzlies and the Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, and Nuggets still being around, the Western Conference, unfortunately, for some people, is still the better conference.